Be me, I guess, about 3 years back. Life was pretty standard. Had a stable job in tech support, my own apartment, and a car that mostly worked. My biggest issue wasn't my job or my finances. It was a girl, Pamela. We'd known each other since college. I was firmly, hopelessly, in the friend zone. I told myself it was fine, that I was just being a good friend. Deep down, I was just hoping she'd eventually see me. Looking back, it's embarrassing how much of my life revolved around her schedule. My weekends weren't mine. They were on call for whatever crisis she was having. It could be anything. Her Wi-Fi is down. She needs a ride across town. She bought furniture she can't assemble. The furniture one was a classic. It happened maybe a month before everything changed. She calls me on a Saturday morning, sounding absolutely desperate. She'd bought some massive, complicated wardrobe system from IKEA, the kind with 1,000 pieces and instructions written in runes. Of course, I dropped my own plans and drove over. I spent the next 6 hours on my hands and knees, deciphering diagrams and wrestling with Allen keys. The whole time she was on her phone, just sitting on the couch, scrolling, taking selfies with a pouty face, captioning them bored. She didn't offer me a glass of water. She didn't help hold a single board. Her only input was to occasionally look over and say something like, "Are you sure that piece goes there? It looks crooked." At one point, I tried to make conversation, mentioned something about a tough week I had at work. She just waved her hand dismissively. "Ugh, don't bore me with your male workplace drama. You have no idea what it's like for women." I just shut up and kept working. The air in the room was thick with her entitlement. While I was finishing up, sweating and covered in sawdust, I saw her typing furiously on her phone. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from Twitter. She'd tagged me in a photo once, so I got her updates. Her new post read, "Spent my Saturday watching a man struggle with basic instructions. It's amazing how they claim to be builders and fixers, yet they can't even follow a simple diagram." Toxic masculinity. Weaponized incompetence. I just stared at the screen. My hands were raw from the cheap tools, my back was aching, and she was publicly mocking me for helping her, for free, on my own time. That was a big crack in the dam, but it wasn't the thing that broke it. Not yet. I learned later that I wasn't her only helper. She had an entire ecosystem of men she used for different things. At her marketing job, there was a guy named Marvin. She called him her work husband. Marvin was quiet, smart, and incredibly good at data analysis. Pamela was good at taking credit. I met him once at a work party she dragged me to. He seemed like a nice, if stressed-out guy. She'd later bragged to me about how she managed her workload. It turned out her management strategy was to offload all the difficult technical parts of her projects onto Marvin. She'd frame it as collaborating, but it was pure delegation. He'd spend days pulling numbers and building complex spreadsheets, and she'd spend an hour making the PowerPoint look pretty. Then she'd present the whole thing as her own work. She told me she'd sometimes give him a nod in the meeting, a little, and thanks to Marvin for his support, which she thought was incredibly generous. He was doing the work of 2 people and getting the salary of 1. She was getting praised for his effort. Then there was her dating life. She wasn't looking for a relationship. She was looking for a lifestyle subsidy. There was a rotation of guys, but her main one at the time was Raul. Raul was a decent-looking guy who worked in finance. His main qualification, as far as I could tell, was that he had a disposable income and a desire to please. She'd talk about their dates. They always involved expensive restaurants, rooftop bars, or concerts. She never paid for a thing, not even the Uber ride there. She'd describe the interactions in clinical detail, how she'd let him talk about his boring job for exactly 10 minutes before changing the subject back to herself, how she'd offer just enough vague physical contact, a hand on his arm, a quick hug at the end of the night to keep him interested for the next reservation. She'd show me pictures from these dates. It was always a photo of her cocktail, her plate of food, or a selfie of just her. Raoul was never in the frame. He wasn't a person. He was a provider of scenery for her social media feed. She thought it was hilarious, a victory. She was hacking the system, getting all the benefits of a provider without any of the commitment. Her worldview was a strange mix of victimhood and superiority. In her online posts, all men were part of an oppressive system designed to keep women down. In her real life, every man she knew was a tool to be used to make her life easier. Patrick the handyman, Marvin the workhorse, and Raoul the wallet. We were all just resources, human power-ups in the game of her life. The breaking point for me came a few days after the IKEA incident. I was at home, feeling pretty low about the whole situation, still making excuses for her, telling myself she was just stressed. I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from one of her friends. It was a long rant about how men expect praise for doing the bare minimum. Pamela had commented on it. I clicked to read the thread. Her comment, meant for her friend, was a little piece of advice. You're so right. The trick is to make them feel useful without ever admitting you actually need them. If you praise them, they get an ego. Just act like you're entitled to their help. It's the least they can do to make up for the patriarchy, lol. And there it was. Not a thoughtless jab in a moment of frustration. It was a calculated, stated strategy. A philosophy of exploitation disguised as social justice. Every ride I'd given her, every computer I'd fixed, every piece of furniture I'd built. It wasn't friendship. It was me paying some kind of imaginary patriarchal debt she had invented. Something inside me just switched off. It wasn't anger. It was a profound, quiet emptiness. The hope I'd been holding on to for years just evaporated. I didn't make a big scene. I didn't send her an angry text. I just went silent. It took her about 2 days to notice. My phone buzzed. A text from Pamela. Hey, my laptop is making a weird noise. Can you come look at it this week? I read the message, and I did nothing. An hour later, another text. The next day, a voicemail. Her voice was already laced with annoyance. Patrick, I know you see my messages. My laptop is really important for work. I need you to fix it. Call me back. I deleted the voicemail. A few days later, she called me while I was at work. I let it go to voicemail. This message was different. It was a full-blown rant. How I was being a terrible friend. How I was selfish and unreliable. How she was always there for me, a complete fabrication. And this is how I repay her. I listened to the whole thing, and I felt nothing. It was just noise. The first real test came about a week later. On a Sunday night, I get a frantic series of texts. Emergency. A shelf in my bathroom just collapsed. All my expensive skincare products are shattered on the floor. It's a huge mess. I can't handle this alone. Please come over. The old me would have been in my car before she even finished typing. The new me just looked at the messages. I thought for a minute. Then I typed a reply. Sorry to hear that. Sounds like you should call a handyman. Have a good night. I turned my phone on silent and went to sleep. It was the best I'd slept in years. The next morning, I had 5 missed calls and a wall of text messages calling me every name in the book. It confirmed I had made the right decision. Meanwhile, the other cogs in her machine were starting to grind to a halt. At her office, Marvin was reaching his own limit. Pamela had been assigned the lead on a major quarterly report. It was a huge deal, with a big presentation to the executive board. As usual, she delegated the entire data analysis part to Marvin. It was a mountain of work, requiring weeks of effort. Marvin, for his part, did what he always did. He worked late, double-checked the numbers, and built a flawless data set. Pamela took his work, plugged it into her template, and gave the presentation. By all accounts, it was a huge success. The board was impressed. Her boss was thrilled. A week later, the quarterly bonuses were announced. Pamela got a substantial one for leading the project to success. Marvin got an email from their boss with a subject line, "Good job, team." He got nothing else. That was it for him. The feeling of being used finally outweighed his fear of confrontation. He didn't quit. He didn't complain to HR. He just stopped being her safety net. The very next week, their boss gave Pamela a new, smaller project, a follow-up analysis based on the big report. It was time-sensitive. She walked over to Marvin's desk with her usual breezy confidence. "Hey, got a new one for us. I'll forward you the details. I need the preliminary numbers by Wednesday." Marvin didn't even look up from his screen. He just said, "Sorry, Pamela. I'm swamped with my own projects this week. You'll have to handle that one yourself." She was stunned. She tried to push back. "But you always handle the data side. I'm not good with spreadsheets." He finally turned to look at her, his expression completely neutral. "I'm sure you'll figure it out. You're the project lead, after all." She stood there for a full minute, speechless, before walking back to her desk in a daze. She was completely lost. She barely knew how to use the software, let alone interpret the raw data Marvin used to prepare for her. Her part of the system had broken down. The third domino was Raoul. After their last date at a ridiculously expensive sushi place, Raoul must have been feeling the same way I was. Used. He was probably a smart guy, just a bit of a romantic. But everyone has their limit. A friend of his was on a dating app and saw Pamela's profile. He took a screenshot and sent it to Raoul, probably as a joke. Her bio was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive entitlement. It said something like, "Looking for a man who knows how to treat a woman, must be ambitious and generous, not looking for a hookup or a project. If you're not going to put in the effort, swipe left." It also listed her height, and then in parentheses, because apparently that matters to you fragile men. For Raoul, seeing that bio after he'd just dropped hundreds of dollars on her dinner was the final straw. It was a clear, unambiguous signal that he was not a person to her. He was an applicant for a job, the job of funding her lifestyle. Pamela, completely oblivious, was having a bad week. My silence and Marvin's newfound spine were getting to her. She needed an ego boost. She decided to cash in her Raoul chip for some validation and a free meal. She sent him a text. "Hey you, I was thinking we should try that new Italian place this weekend." She waited and waited. No reply. She sent another one a day later. "Everything okay?" She showed the text to her friend later, complaining about how he was ghosting her for no reason. When she went to check his profile picture, she noticed her message had a next to it. It hadn't been delivered. He hadn't ghosted her. He had blocked her number. Within the span of about 2 weeks, her entire support system had independently and quietly opted out. The handyman was no longer on call. The workhorse was no longer pulling her cart. The ATM was closed for business. Her reaction was not one of self-reflection. It was pure, unadulterated panic and rage. She started complaining constantly to her one remaining close friend. The friend, who had always been her echo chamber for misandrist rhetoric, started to look a little uncomfortable. Pamela would rant about how Patrick was a toxic fake friend, how Marvin was sabotaging her at work out of jealousy, and how Raoul was a typical man-child who couldn't handle a strong woman. At one point, her friend cautiously asked, "Well, did you ever offer to pay Patrick for his time? Or offer to share the bonus credit with Marvin?" Pamela looked at her as if she'd just sprouted a second head. "Why would I do that? That's what they're supposed to do. Men are supposed to provide and support. It's like the one good thing they're programmed for." Her friend just sort of nodded slowly and changed the subject. The cracks were showing everywhere. At home, Her apartment was falling into minor disrepair. A light bulb flickered in the hall. Her drain was clogged. Small things she would have instantly outsourced to me were now her own problems to solve. She had to actually Google a plumber and was horrified at the call-out fee. At work, she was drowning. Without Marvin to do the heavy lifting, her incompetence was becoming obvious. She missed a deadline for the first time ever. The report she tried to do herself was full of errors, and her boss was starting to ask questions. Her social life took a nosedive. Without a rotating cast of suitors to take her out, her weekends became quiet. She was spending more and more time alone in her apartment. Her online presence became more and more aggressive. Her posts were no longer just witty feminist quips. They were bitter, angry tirades, rants about how all men are useless, selfish, and treacherous. She was projecting her own failures onto half the population. She was describing herself, but changing the pronouns. The validation she got from her online followers was the only thing holding her together. But it was a hollow kind of support. 1,000 likes on a post can't fix a clogged drain or write a data analysis report. She was the queen of a kingdom she had built, but she had driven out all the farmers, builders, and soldiers. Now she was sitting alone in her castle, wondering why she was starving. The real collapse was still to come. This was just the beginning of her reaping what she had sown. The next phase of Pamela's decline was slow, like a car running out of gas on a long, empty road. At first, she tried to adapt, using the only tools she had, manipulation and blame. Her first target was Marvin. She couldn't force him to do her work, so she tried to make his life difficult. She'd forget to invite him to important meetings. She'd accidentally delete shared files he needed. She'd make passive-aggressive comments in team chats, things like, "It's so great when everyone contributes equally to a project." It didn't work. Marvin was meticulous. He kept his own backups. He confirmed meeting invites with the boss directly. Her little acts of sabotage were so clumsy that they only made her look incompetent. Worse for her, without Pamela leeching off his time and energy, Marvin's own work started to shine. He was taking on his own projects, speaking up in meetings, and showing the higher-ups what he was really capable of. People started noticing. Specifically, their boss started noticing that Marvin was a powerhouse, and Pamela was a drag on the team. Her social life was also cratering. Her friend, the one who had always been her loyal cheerleader, was starting to pull away. Pamela's constant negativity was exhausting. Every conversation was a long, bitter monologue about how the world was against her. She'd call her friend to vent for an hour, never once asking how her friend was doing. One evening, the friend made a mistake. She tried to offer genuine advice. She told Pamela, "You know, maybe you're relying too much on other people. Maybe you should try learning how to do some of these things yourself. It would be empowering." Pamela exploded. It was a torrent of accusations. How her friend was a pick-me who was siding with the patriarchy. How she didn't understand what real oppression felt like. How she was a traitor to the cause. The friend went quiet on the other end of the line. After Pamela ran out of breath, she just said, "Okay, Pam, I have to go." After that, the friend was always busy, always had a headache, always had to go. Pamela was now truly an island. Desperate for the attention she was no longer getting, she doubled down on her last remaining source, online dating. But her approach was all wrong. She was leading with bitterness and entitlement. Her bio read like a list of demands. Her opening messages were often tests or complaints. She'd match with a guy, and her first message would be something like, "So are you just another man who's going to waste my time?" The conversations would die before they even started. The men she matched with weren't desperate. They had options. They weren't looking for a project or a fight. She saw this not as a flaw in her strategy, but as proof of her worldview. All men were trash. They were intimidated by a strong woman. They couldn't handle the truth. The reality was much simpler. Nobody wants to date a person who clearly hates them. Her world had shrunk to her apartment and her increasingly toxic social media bubble. The big confrontation at her job happened on a Tuesday. I only know the details because her former friend told me about it months later, after she and I reconnected. The boss had called Pamela into his office. Marvin was there too. The boss laid it out in cold corporate terms. Her performance over the last 2 months had fallen off a cliff. She had missed 3 major deadlines. Her latest report was so full of errors that it was unusable. He told her they were putting her on a formal performance improvement plan, a PIP. Anyone who's worked in an office knows that a PIP is just the first step to getting fired. It's HR's way of documenting your failure before they show you the door. Pamela went into full panic mode. Her first instinct was to find a man to blame. She pointed a shaking finger at Marvin. She launched into a prepared speech about how Marvin had created a hostile work environment for her, how he was refusing to collaborate, how he was gatekeeping information, how his refusal to support her was a form of professional sabotage driven by male fragility. The boss just listened, his expression unreadable. Marvin said nothing. He just sat there, calm. When she was done, the boss slid a folder across the table. He said, "Pamela, while you've been missing deadlines, Marvin has single-handedly developed a new analytics model that's projected to increase our client retention by 15%. He did this on his own time, on top of his regular duties." He turned to Marvin. "Marvin, the board has approved a promotion for you. You're now the senior data analyst for the whole department. Congratulations." Then he turned back to Pamela. "Your PIP starts today. You'll report directly to Marvin. He will be overseeing your work from now on." The friend said she saw Pamela walk out of that office. Her face was pale, a mixture of shock, fury, and utter humiliation. She had to go back to her desk and sit there, knowing that the man she'd used as a footstool was now her boss. It was a complete and total defeat. That night, my doorbell rang. It was late, maybe 10 p.m. I wasn't expecting anyone. I looked through the peephole, and my stomach dropped. It was Pamela. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy from crying. Her hair was a mess. She was wearing a stained sweatshirt. This wasn't the confident, defiant woman from social media. This was a person who had hit rock bottom. My first instinct was to not open the door, to just stand there until she went away. But some lingering, stupid part of my old self felt a pang of pity. I opened the door. She didn't even wait for me to speak. She just started talking, the words spilling out in a desperate rush. It was a story about how her boss was a misogynist, how Marvin was a snake who had stolen her ideas and backstabbed her, how her friends had abandoned her, how the world was designed to punish strong women like her. She was looking at me with those big, tear-filled eyes, the same look she used to use when she needed me to fix her printer or drive her to the airport. She was playing the hits. She was trying to activate the old programming. "You're the only one who ever really understood me, Patrick," she said, her voice cracking. "You're the only good one left." It was my cue. I was supposed to let her in, make her tea, listen to her for 3 hours, and then tell her that she was right and everyone else was wrong. I was supposed to absorb her misery and validate her victimhood. But the programming was gone. I just felt tired. I stood in the doorway, blocking her path. I didn't invite her in. I let her finish her whole story. When she was done, there was a long, awkward silence. She was waiting for me to save her. I just looked at her and said, "That sounds tough, Pamela." My voice was flat, devoid of the sympathy she was mining for. She looked confused. This wasn't how the script was supposed to go. Can I come in for a bit?" she asked, her voice small. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. It's late, and I'm busy." She blinked, as if the words weren't registering. "Busy? What are you busy with?" I gestured to the boxes stacked in my living room behind me. "I'm packing," I said. "I'm moving." The confusion on her face turned to sheer, unfiltered panic. It was the look of someone watching their last lifeboat sink. Moving? Moving where? Why? "I got a new job," I told her, "in a different city. Better pay, better opportunities. I leave next week." She just stared at me. All the fake tears, all the manufactured drama, it all just vanished. She was looking at a practical problem. Her last support column was about to be removed, and then she said it. The most honest, most selfish, most Pamela thing she could possibly say. But what about me? Not congratulations, not I'll miss you. Just what about me? How does my life decision affect her access to my free labor? I almost laughed. It was so perfectly her. I looked at her, standing there on my doorstep, a monument to her own bad decisions. And I didn't feel anger. I didn't even feel pity anymore. I just felt closure. I said, "You'll be fine, Pamela. You've always told me you're a strong, independent woman. You don't need a man for anything." I used her own words, her own mantra, and handed it back to her. Her face crumpled. She finally understood. There was no help coming. Not from me. Not anymore. I said, "I have to get back to packing. Good luck with everything." And I closed the door. I stood there for a minute, listening. I heard a single frustrated sob, and then the sound of her footsteps retreating down the hall. I never saw her in person again. The end of the story is quiet. There's no big explosion, just the slow settling of dust. I moved to my new city. My new job was great. I made new friends. I met a girl, a normal, kind, well-adjusted girl who treats me like a partner, not an appliance. My life got infinitely better the moment I decided my time and energy were valuable. I heard through the grapevine what happened to the others. Marvin thrived as a manager. He ended up hiring a team of talented people and became one of the most respected figures in the company. He got married a year later. Raul, the finance guy, also met someone new. I saw a picture of them on a mutual friend's feed. They were on vacation somewhere, both of them beaming. He was in the picture this time. As for Pamela, her ending was much different. She lasted another 2 months at her job before she was let go. She couldn't handle the pressure of actually having to work, and she certainly couldn't handle reporting to Marvin. Her friend told me she tried to sue the company for wrongful termination, claiming discrimination. The case was thrown out immediately. She lost her apartment a few months after that. Her social media influencer career never took off, and without a steady income, she couldn't afford the rent. The last I heard, she had moved back in with her parents in her mid-30s. Out of some morbid curiosity, I looked at her Twitter profile one last time before I deleted my account. It was still active, but it was different. The posts were less frequent. The angry, defiant tone was gone, replaced by something that sounded weary and defeated. Her last post wasn't a call to dismantle the patriarchy. It was just a simple, sad question. Does anyone else just feel really, really lonely? It had 3 likes. She had spent years telling men they were unnecessary. She'd built her entire identity on the idea that she was better off without them. In the end, she got exactly what she asked for.